president is determined to solve this problem and took further action today. I signed an executive order delivering most favored nation prescription drug pricing to American patients.
And President Trump looking to use triple-digit tariffs to push pharmaceutical companies to make their drugs in the United States.
It's a quiet moment of dread millions know too well. The pause. That split second after the pharmacist scans your prescription, before the price flashes on the screen, in that heartbeat, the question hits. Can I afford this? This scene plays out countless times every day in America, the human face of a staggering fact. In 2023, Americans spent over $600 billion on prescription drugs. That's more than the entire economies of Sweden or Argentina, boiled down to about $1,200 to $1,600 per person, double or triple what people in most developed nations pay for the same medicines, often made in the same factories. This isn't simply economics. It's about power. The power to set a price and the powerlessness of those forced to pay it. For decades, this imbalance was accepted, but cracks began to show when the highest office in the land took aim at Big Pharma. President Donald Trump issued an executive order with a bold premise. The U.S. should never pay more for a drug than the lowest price charged in other developed nations, a most favored nation policy. The proposal sent shockwaves through the pharmaceutical industry. Today, we'll explore the battlegrounds of this fight, pinpointing which states could see real relief for millions of residents, and which ones might face economic upheaval as their most powerful industries come under fire. 1. Mississippi. Our journey begins in Mississippi, a state that sits at the very heart of America's chronic disease crisis. Here, the statistics are not just numbers on a page. They are the lived reality for friends, neighbors, and families. The state has the unfortunate distinction of having the highest diabetes rate in the entire United States, hovering around a staggering 14.8% to 17%, well above the national average. In some counties, it's closer to 1 in 5 adults. This isn't just a health issue, it's a part of the cultural fabric. Now layer that on top of the state's economic context. With a median household income of around $52,000 a year, the lowest in the nation, the financial reality for most Mississippians is a tightrope walk at the best of times. When you live in a state where the poverty rate is consistently among the highest, an unexpected car repair can be a catastrophe. A vial of insulin, which can easily cost hundreds of dollars a month without good insurance, isn't just an expense, it's a potential financial apocalypse. This crushing burden forces people into unthinkable situations. They skip doses, stretching a 30-day supply into 40 or 50 days. They share insulin with family members. They fall into the terrifying spiral of diabetic ketoacidosis, a preventable emergency that lands them in the hospital, saddled with even more debt. This is where the most favored nation policy transforms from a political headline into a lifeline. A 30%, 50%, or even 80% reduction in the price of insulin and other chronic disease medications would be one of the most significant anti-poverty and public health initiatives in the state's history. It would mean tens of thousands of people could finally afford to take their medication as prescribed. The immediate impact would be a dramatic reduction in emergency room visits, hospitalizations, and life-altering complications like kidney failure, blindness, and amputations. The downstream effects on the state's budget would be immense, easing the tremendous strain on Mississippi's Medicaid program. However, the policy also illuminates a deeper, more stubborn challenge. In Mississippi, price is only one barrier to care. The state's healthcare infrastructure is fragile. Rural hospitals are closing at an alarming rate, creating vast pharmacy deserts where the nearest place to fill a prescription is an hour's drive away. For someone without reliable transportation, a cheaper drug is meaningless if you can't get to it. So while lowering the price is a critical, life-saving first step, it's a stark reminder that in places like Mississippi, the fight for health is fought on multiple fronts. Price, access, and infrastructure are all inextricably linked. 2. West Virginia. Travel north into the heart of Appalachia, and you'll find West Virginia, a state defined by its resilient people, its proud history, and a public health crisis of staggering proportions. Here, the diabetes rate is nearly as high as Mississippi's at around 13% to 18.2%, but it's compounded by some of the nation's highest rates of heart disease, obesity, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD, a legacy of the coal mines that once powered the nation. The economic context in West Virginia is unique. It's one of the oldest states by median age, with a large population of retirees and seniors living on fixed incomes. For them, the relentless rise in drug prices isn't just a squeeze, it's a betrayal. They've worked their entire lives, paid into the system, and now, in their golden years, they find themselves locked in a monthly battle to afford the medications that keep them alive. Social Security checks that were meant for food and modest comforts are instead being swallowed whole by the pharmacy counter. Imagine a retired coal miner, living on a small pension and Medicare. His doctor prescribes a new generation inhaler for his COPD, a medication that could dramatically improve his quality of life. But under Medicare, Part D's donut hole, he's suddenly faced with a bill for hundreds of dollars. The choice becomes grimly simple: breathe easier or buy groceries for the month. This isn't a hypothetical, it's a daily reality in the hollows and towns of West Virginia. A most favored nation policy would be a godsend for this demographic. Cheaper insulin, more affordable heart medications, and accessible inhalers would immediately ease the immense financial load on hundreds of thousands of seniors. The indirect effect would be just as powerful. West Virginia's state budget is perpetually strained, with Medicaid and other public health programs consuming a massive share. By lowering the sticker price of drugs, the state could save tens of millions of dollars, funds that could be reinvested into other critical areas, like combating the opioid crisis or improving rural healthcare access. This policy wouldn't just be putting money back into the pockets of its most vulnerable citizens, it would be giving the entire state critical breathing room. 3. Alabama. In Alabama, the story of healthcare is a story of distance. With a diabetes rate of around 14% to 15.7%, the need is immense and widespread. But in the state's vast rural stretches, the so-called Black Belt and beyond, getting medicine isn't just about affording it, it's about physically reaching it. Many residents have to travel long distances, sometimes across county lines, just to see a doctor or visit a pharmacy. This adds another layer of cost and burden: the price of gas, time off work, wear and tear on an old car. When the journey itself is an obstacle, the price at the end of that journey becomes even more critical. If you've spent 2 hours and $10 in gas to get to the pharmacy, only to find your prescription costs an unaffordable $200, the sense of defeat is overwhelming. It's no surprise that treatment adherence becomes a major issue. It's easier to just try and get by, to hope for the best, until the inevitable health crisis strikes. This is the environment where a 30% to 80% price cut becomes truly transformative. For a low-income worker in a rural poultry plant or a farmer on a tight budget, this isn't a marginal gain. It's the difference between managing a chronic disease and letting it spiral out of control. It turns an insurmountable barrier into a manageable expense. The socioeconomic benefits would ripple outwards. A healthier population is a more productive population. When people can afford their medication, they take fewer sick days. They are more able to work, to care for their families, and to participate in their communities. In a state striving for economic development, improving public health isn't just a social good, it's a powerful economic lever. By making medicine affordable, you are investing in the human capital of the state. Better health leads to a stronger workforce, which in turn can attract new businesses and create a virtuous cycle of growth and opportunity, proving that the price of a pill in Alabama has implications that reach far beyond the pharmacy counter. 4. Arkansas. In Arkansas, the battle against chronic disease is fought in the margins. With a diabetes rate topping 13.6% and a poverty rate of around 16%, the state's residents are exceptionally vulnerable to the punishing logic of high drug costs. Here, the problem isn't just the initial diagnosis, it's the terrifying and expensive cascade of complications that follows when treatment is unaffordable. Untreated or poorly managed diabetes is a relentless disease. It doesn't just affect blood sugar. It attacks the entire body. It leads to kidney failure, requiring years of punishing and costly dialysis. It causes diabetic retinopathy, a condition that can lead to permanent blindness. It results in nerve damage so severe that it necessitates lower limb amputations. Each of these outcomes is a personal tragedy, a devastating loss of health and quality of life. But they are also a colossal financial burden on the state. Arkansas has a high Medicaid enrollment rate, meaning the public is on the hook for the astronomical costs of these preventable complications. A single dialysis patient can cost the system tens of thousands of dollars a year. A limb amputation involves surgery, hospitalization, rehabilitation, and a lifetime of care. When you multiply that by thousands of patients, you begin to understand the scale of the financial crisis that high drug prices create. This is why a most favored nation policy in Arkansas is about more than just the price of insulin. It's a powerful tool for prevention. By making the upfront primary medications affordable, the state could drastically reduce the downstream incidence of these catastrophic complications. The savings to the Medicaid system would be astronomical in the long term. This isn't just about saving money in the next fiscal quarter. It's about changing the entire health trajectory of the state for a generation. It's an investment that pays for itself countless times over, not just in dollars and cents saved, but in eyes and kidneys and limbs preserved. 5. Louisiana. Louisiana is a state of profound contrasts. Its vibrant culture and rich history exist alongside some of the most complex and deeply entrenched public health challenges in the nation. A diabetes rate of around 13.5%, coupled with high rates of obesity and hypertension, paints a grim picture. But in Louisiana, these issues are magnified by geography and access. In the poor, rural communities of the north and the isolated coastal fishing villages of the south, healthcare can feel a world away. For many low-income workers in the state's vital service, tourism, and port industries, a trip to the pharmacy is a major logistical and financial challenge. These are often jobs with unpredictable hours and no paid sick leave. Taking time off to see a doctor means losing a day's wages. A high copay can wipe out a week's grocery budget. In this environment, treatment compliance is a luxury many feel they cannot afford. The result is a revolving door at the local hospital. People manage their chronic conditions on their own until they can't anymore, ending up in the emergency room with dangerously high blood pressure or a diabetes-related crisis. These hospitalizations are incredibly expensive and disruptive, both for the patient and for the already overburdened healthcare system. A policy that dramatically lowers insulin and other medication prices would be a powerful intervention in this cycle of crisis. It would empower people to manage their health proactively, rather than reactively. For a dock worker in New Orleans or a shrimper in a coastal parish, being able to afford their blood pressure medication every month means they can stay on the job, support their family, and avoid a catastrophic health event. It would ease the immense burden on families and communities, reducing the number of costly hospitalizations and allowing Louisiana to redirect its precious healthcare resources toward prevention and primary care, building a healthier and more resilient future for the entire state. Part 2, the giants and the stakes. We now move from the states where this policy is a story of pure relief to the states where the equation becomes far more complicated. These are the economic powerhouses, the population centers, and the industrial heartlands of America. In these states, a radical change in drug pricing isn't just about patients. It's about the massive economies, the tens of millions of people, and the billion-dollar industries that call them home. 6. California. Everything in California is a matter of scale. With a population of nearly 39 million people, it's the most populous state in the Union. It's an economic entity so massive that if it were its own country, it would have the 5th largest economy in the world. And just as its economy is massive, so are its healthcare challenges. The sheer number of residents with chronic diseases like diabetes is larger than the entire population of some of the states we've just discussed. The cost of living in California is notoriously high. From housing to groceries to gas, everything costs more. Healthcare is no exception. In this high-cost environment, even families with decent incomes can find themselves stretched to the breaking point by the price of prescription drugs. A most favored nation policy, therefore, has the potential for savings on an almost unimaginable scale. The state's Medicaid program, Medi-Cal, is the largest in the country, and the savings from lower drug prices could run into the billions of dollars annually. For individual patients and their families, the relief from financial strain would be enormous, freeing up money for mortgages, education, and other essentials. But California is also a land of immense innovation, and that's where the conflict arises. The state, particularly the Bay Area and San Diego, is a global hub for the biotechnology and pharmaceutical industries. It's a place where groundbreaking research happens, where startups are born in university labs, and where venture capital flows into the search for the next miracle cure. These companies, from small biotech firms to established giants, argue that the high prices they charge in the US are what fund this incredibly expensive and risky research and development. This sets up a profound tension. A policy that slashes drug prices could, in theory, reduce the revenue flowing into these California-based companies. The industry warns this could lead to a chilling effect on R&D investment. Would fewer startups get funded? Would research into rare diseases be abandoned? Would California's role as a leader in medical innovation be diminished? This is the central conflict for the Golden State. How to balance the immediate perturbations be desperate need for affordable medicine for its 39 million residents with the long-term health of an industry that promises to create the cures of tomorrow. It's a multi-billion-dollar question with no easy answer. 7. Texas. Texas, with its booming population of 30 million people, shares California's challenges of scale. It has a massive and growing population of people living with diabetes and other chronic conditions. But Texas has another, more critical distinction. It holds the unenviable title of the state, with the highest uninsured rate in the United States. Roughly 16% of its population, millions of people, have no health insurance at all. For the uninsured in Texas, the healthcare system is a brutal landscape. There are no negotiated insurance rates, no co-pays, no prescription drug plans. They are exposed to the full, undiscounted list price of every medication. For them, affordability is not a matter of convenience. It is the only thing that matters. A life-saving drug might as well be on the moon if its price is $1,000 a month. They are forced to rely on emergency rooms for basic care, a practice that is both terrible for their health and incredibly expensive for the state's taxpayers, who ultimately foot the bill for uncompensated care. In this context, a most favored nation policy would be nothing short of a revolution. Deep cuts to the list price of essential drugs would directly benefit the most vulnerable people in the state. It would mean that a construction worker in Dallas or a restaurant server in San Antonio who lacks insurance might finally be able to afford their blood pressure medication or their child's asthma inhaler out of pocket. This would represent one of the single most significant improvements in healthcare access for the uninsured in the state's history. However, like California, Texas also has a significant economic stake in the pharmaceutical industry. The state is home to numerous pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities and research centers. The industry is a source of high-paying jobs and contributes significantly to the state's economy. The concern, therefore, is that a policy that dramatically reduces industry profits could have a negative impact on this sector. Would companies scale back their operations in Texas? Would planned expansions be put on hold? The state's leadership would be forced to weigh the immense, immediate benefit for its millions of uninsured residents against the potential economic disruption to a key industry. 8. Florida. Florida is America's retirement capital. With over 21% of its 22 million residents aged 65 or older, the state has one of the highest proportions of senior citizens in the nation. For this population, prescription drugs are not an occasional need. They are a fundamental part of daily life. Seniors are the primary consumers of long-term medications for chronic conditions like diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, and heart disease. Many of these retirees live on fixed incomes, relying on Medicare and their personal savings. While Medicare provides essential coverage, its Part D prescription drug plan is notoriously complex, with coverage gaps like the donut hole that can expose seniors to thousands of dollars in out-of-pocket costs. For a retiree trying to make their savings last, a sudden high drug bill can be a source of intense anxiety and financial distress. They are often forced to choose between their medications and other essential expenses. A most favored nation policy would provide a massive and direct benefit to this huge and politically powerful demographic. Lowering the base price of drugs would make medications more affordable for every senior in Florida, whether they are in the initial coverage phase or the dreaded donut hole. This would be a huge political victory for any elected official and would provide tangible, immediate relief to millions of retirees. The policy could also have a fascinating side effect on Florida's unique healthcare economy. For years, Florida has been a hub for the re-importation of prescription drugs, with residents often traveling to Canada or ordering from international pharmacies to find lower prices. A policy that brings international pricing to their local Walgreens or CVS could effectively end this practice, fundamentally altering the patterns of the gray market for pharmaceuticals and keeping more of that healthcare spending within the state's economy. 9. New York, the high cost of big city life narrator. In New York, and especially in the 5 boroughs of New York City, the cost of everything is amplified. The state's 19 million residents, heavily concentrated in the metro area, face some of the highest healthcare and drug costs in the entire country. For middle and low-income households, the financial pressure is immense. The high cost of rent, food, and transportation leaves little room for error, and an expensive prescription can easily tip a family's budget into chaos. This pressure is particularly acute for the city's large and diverse immigrant communities. Many work in jobs that don't offer health insurance, and they may face language or cultural barriers that make navigating the complex healthcare system even more difficult. For them, the pharmacy is often the first and only point of contact with the medical world, and the price they are quoted there is the final word. Lowering drug prices to international levels would provide a direct and powerful form of financial relief to these communities. It would benefit the working-class families in the outer boroughs, the new immigrants trying to gain a foothold, and everyone in between who is struggling to keep up with the city's relentless expenses. But New York is not just a city of neighborhoods. It's the financial capital of the world. It is home to the headquarters of major pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer, and the stock markets where the fortunes of all pharmaceutical companies are decided. The announcement of a most favored nation policy would likely send shockwaves through Wall Street. Pharma stocks would almost certainly tumble as investors recalculated future profit margins. This could have a broader negative impact on the market, affecting pension funds and retirement accounts across the country. The financial industry in New York would be at the epicenter of this reaction, creating a fascinating conflict within the state itself. A policy that would provide immense relief to millions of its residents could simultaneously cause turmoil in its most powerful industry, Tenor, Illinois. With a population of over 12.5 million, largely centered in the Chicago metropolitan area, Illinois is a microcosm of the American heartland. It faces the same challenges as many other states, above-average rates of diabetes and heart disease, and a constant struggle to balance its state budget. For Illinois, the state's Medicaid program is a major line item, and the high cost of prescription drugs is a significant driver of those expenses. A policy that reduces drug prices would therefore have a direct and positive impact on the state's fiscal health, freeing up taxpayer money for other priorities like education and infrastructure. The benefits for patients are just as clear. In the urban neighborhoods of Chicago and the small towns across the state, lower drug costs would mean better health outcomes and less financial strain for working families. But Illinois also plays a unique and critical role in the pharmaceutical ecosystem. Because of its central location, it serves as a massive distribution and logistics hub for the entire industry. Major pharmaceutical distributors have vast warehouses and operations in Illinois, from which they ship medicines across the country. A fundamental change in drug pricing would force a complete rethink of their business strategies. Pricing models, supply chains, and inventory management would all have to be overhauled. This could lead to uncertainty and potential disruption in this key sector of the state's economy. Illinois would find itself at the crossroads of a policy that helps its people and its budget, while simultaneously forcing a strategic reckoning within one of its important industries. Part 3, the industry's heartland. We now arrive at the epicenters of the American pharmaceutical and biotech industries. In these states, Big Pharma isn't a distant, faceless entity. It's the company your neighbor works for. It's the new research campus being built down the road. It's a cornerstone of the state's economy and a source of immense regional pride. Here, the most favored nation policy is not a simple question of lower prices. It's a direct threat to jobs, investment, and a way of life. 11. New Jersey. New Jersey is, without exaggeration, the pharma capital of the United States, often called the medicine chest of the world. It is home to an unparalleled concentration of pharmaceutical giants. Companies like Johnson & Johnson and Merck are not just businesses located in New Jersey. They are deeply woven into the state's economic and cultural identity. The life sciences industry in New Jersey has a staggering economic impact, generating over $120 billion in activity and supporting hundreds of thousands of high-paying jobs, both directly and indirectly. For New Jersey, President Trump's executive order is not a policy proposal. It's an existential threat. The central argument of the pharmaceutical industry is that the high profits earned in the United States are the engine of innovation. These profits, they contend, are what fund the risky, decade-long, billion-dollar gambles required to develop new, life-saving drugs. A policy that slashes those profits by tying U.S. prices to much lower international benchmarks would, in their view, starve that engine of its fuel. The potential negative consequences for New Jersey are stark. Companies might be forced to cut back on research and development, potentially closing labs or shelving promising but commercially risky projects. They could scale back their manufacturing operations or even move jobs to other countries. The ripple effect through the state's economy would be massive, affecting not just the scientists and executives, but the construction workers who build the facilities, the vendors who supply them, and the local businesses that serve their employees. This creates an almost impossible tension for the state's leaders. On one hand, their residents, like all Americans, suffer from high drug costs and would benefit immensely from lower prices. On the other hand, protecting the state's flagship industry is a top priority. They would be forced to walk a political tightrope, trying to balance the immediate health needs of their constituents with the long-term economic health of their most powerful corporate citizens. In New Jersey, the battle over drug prices is not a distant debate. It's a civil war between two competing, vital interests. 12th, Massachusetts. If New Jersey is the established capital of Big Pharma, then Massachusetts, specifically the Boston and Cambridge area, is the undisputed global hub of biotechnology and medical research. Kendall Square in Cambridge has been called the most innovative square mile on the planet, boasting the densest concentration of biotech startups, venture capital firms, and world-class research institutions anywhere. This ecosystem, fueled by talent from MIT and Harvard, is the bleeding edge of medical science, focused on developing the next generation of therapies for diseases like cancer, Alzheimer's, and rare genetic disorders. The economic impact is enormous. The biotech industry in Massachusetts supports tens of thousands of high-wage jobs and has attracted billions of dollars in venture capital investment. This industry is built on a high-risk, high-reward model. Most startups will fail, but the one that succeeds might develop a revolutionary treatment and generate massive returns for its investors. These potential returns are what attract the investment needed to fund the research in the first place. The threat posed by a most favored nation policy is therefore a threat to this entire innovation model. Venture capitalists and biotech executives would argue that if the potential profits from a successful drug are capped by tying them to lower international prices, the incentive to invest in risky, early-stage research will evaporate. Why gamble hundreds of millions of dollars on a new cancer drug if the potential payoff is dramatically reduced? This could lead to a significant reduction in funding for new research. potentially slowing the pace of medical discovery. The unique factor in Massachusetts is that the state already has one of the highest rates of health insurance coverage in the country, at around 97%. This means that while residents would certainly benefit from lower drug costs, the savings might be felt more by insurance companies and the state government than by individuals directly. This could create a unique opportunity. The massive savings from lower drug prices could be reinvested by the state into public health programs or even into grants for early-stage academic research, potentially offsetting some of the feared decline in private investment. Massachusetts, therefore, faces a complex calculus: how to secure the benefits of lower drug prices for its people without undermining the very engine of innovation that makes it a world leader in medicine. 13. Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania plays a vital, though often overlooked, role in the pharmaceutical industry. While not as focused on corporate headquarters or early-stage research, the state is a major center for drug manufacturing, packaging, and distribution. Its strategic location and skilled workforce have made it a critical link in the supply chain that delivers medicines to the rest of the country. For Pennsylvania, the economic impact of a major price cut is a matter of production and logistics. If profit margins are squeezed, companies will be forced to look for efficiencies throughout their operations. This could mean consolidating manufacturing plants, automating more of the production process, or renegotiating contracts with logistics providers. Any of these actions could have a direct impact on jobs in Pennsylvania. At the same time, Pennsylvania has a large elderly population and significant low-income communities in both its urban centers and its rural Appalachian regions. These are the very people who are most burdened by high drug costs and who would benefit the most from improved access and affordability. The state government would also see significant savings for its Medicaid and senior drug assistance programs like PACE and PACENET. Pennsylvania's dilemma highlights the tension between the different stages of the pharmaceutical life cycle. A policy that benefits the end consumer could potentially harm the manufacturing and distribution sectors that are a key part of the state's industrial base. State leaders would need to navigate the difficult task of advocating for their vulnerable citizens while also supporting a critical component of their manufacturing economy, searching for a path that doesn't force them to sacrifice one for the other. 14. Indiana. In Indiana, one name stands above all others in the corporate world: Eli Lilly and Company. Headquartered in Indianapolis since its founding in 1876, Lilly is more than just a company. It's a foundational institution. It is one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies and one of the biggest producers of insulin on the planet. Its economic impact on Indiana is simply immense, contributing billions to the state's GDP and supporting tens of thousands of high-quality jobs. The Lilly Endowment, a private foundation, is a philanthropic powerhouse that has shaped the state for generations. This makes Indiana the ultimate battleground for a policy targeting insulin prices. With a diabetes rate of around 11%, thousands of Hoosiers stand to gain enormously from a steep cut in the cost of the insulin that is manufactured, quite literally, in their own backyard. For a family in Indiana struggling to afford Lilly's signature product, Humalog, a price cut of 30% to 80% would be a life-altering event. The conflict of interest could not be more direct or more profound. The very policy that would provide massive relief to the state's citizens would simultaneously strike at the profitability of the state's most important and iconic company. A significant reduction in insulin revenue could force Lilly to make difficult business decisions, potentially impacting investment and employment within Indiana. The company has recently announced massive new investments in the state, totaling billions of dollars, and the state's leadership is understandably keen to maintain that positive relationship. The situation in Indiana perfectly crystallizes the central dilemma of the entire drug pricing debate. It pits the immediate, tangible health and financial well-being of a state's residents directly against the economic interests of a globally significant corporation that is also a cornerstone of the local economy. The question for Indiana is a stark one. How do you reconcile a policy that helps your people by directly targeting the profits of your most powerful corporate partner? It's a conflict that lays bare the incredibly complex and often painful choices at the heart of the fight for affordable healthcare in America. conclusion, the unpaid invoice narrator. The journey across these 14 states reveals a fundamental truth. There is no single, simple story about drug prices in America. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. A policy like the Most Favored Nation executive order, which on the surface seems like a straightforward matter of fairness, becomes a complex tapestry of competing interests when laid over the diverse map of the United States. For a diabetic in Mississippi or a senior in West Virginia, it's a lifeline. It's the promise of relief from a crushing financial burden and the chance to manage their health without fear. For a scientist in a Massachusetts biotech lab or a factory worker in a New Jersey pharmaceutical plant, it's a threat. It's the specter of reduced funding, job insecurity, and a potential slowdown in the pace of life-saving innovation. This isn't a simple battle between good and evil, between greedy corporations and suffering patients. It's a clash of legitimate, deeply held interests. The desire for affordable, accessible medicine is a moral imperative. The need to fund the incredibly expensive and uncertain process of scientific discovery is an economic reality. For decades, the American system has resolved this conflict by placing the burden almost entirely on the shoulders of the American patient, asking them to pay the highest prices in the world to subsidize innovation for the entire globe. And that brings us to the ultimate lesson, the real takeaway from this coast-to-coast battle. The price of a pill is never just a number on a screen. It is an invoice. It's a bill for our collective choices, and it reflects our society's deepest values. It forces us to ask a question we have, for too long, avoided. Is healthcare a commodity, subject to the same market forces as a car or a television, or is it a fundamental human right? The fierce debate over a single policy like this one reveals that we haven't truly answered that question. We are a nation caught between the powerful engine of capitalism that has produced miracles of medicine and the profound moral belief that no one should suffer or die because they cannot afford the price of those miracles. Finding a way to reconcile those two powerful truths, to reward innovation without punishing the sick, is the great unfinished business of our time. And until we do, millions of Americans will continue to face that quiet moment of dread at the pharmacy counter, holding their breath and waiting for the cost.